You know what most people don't realize about data privacy? Not all rules are the same. And after analyzing privacy laws across 20 different countries, one fact stands out crystal clear. Where your data physically lives matters a lot. And some of the worst offenders, well, you probably trust them with your data right now. In this video, I'll show you the top 5 countries with the strongest privacy protections, okay? These are where you actually want your data to be stored. Then we'll look at some surprising countries that actually take privacy seriously. And finally, stick around for this, I'll reveal the countries that you should absolutely avoid at all costs. Before we dive in, this is the first time we've made a video specifically about global privacy laws. And after testing cloud storage services for a decade and seeing how privacy laws keep changing, I realized we needed to talk about this. Let's be real about how many companies handle your data. They collect it, they sell it, and they don't always make it easy for you to know exactly what they're doing. And that's exactly why the country where your data lives matters just as much as which service you're using. Because at the end of the day, it's the local privacy laws that actually determine what companies can and can't do with your information. I mean, think about it, okay? Having the strongest lock in the world doesn't matter much if someone can legally open it, right? Some countries take their job super seriously. Well, others, some of the countries you trust the most might actually have the least amount of privacy protections. Let's start with countries that actually put privacy first. At the top of our list, Switzerland. Who would have guessed? Switzerland is basically the gold standard of data privacy. You know how Swiss banks are famous for secrecy? They actually take the same approach with digital data. Their constitution, Article 13 specifically, guarantees privacy as a fundamental right. Think about that. Privacy isn't just law there, it's a constitutional right. What does this mean in practice? Well, let's say a company stores your data in Switzerland. They legally can't share your information without your explicit permission, even if another government asks for it. Companies like pCloud chose Switzerland for exactly this reason. Moving on to our second champion of data privacy, Norway. Now, Norway might not be the first country you think of for privacy, but they've got something called the Norwegian Data Protection Authority. They don't just make rules, they enforce them with fines that will make even tech giants sweat. For example, they imposed a 6.3 million euro fine against dating app Grindr in 2021 for sharing users' personal data with advertisers without proper consent. Back in 2020, toll company Verde got slapped with a 500,000 euro fine for illegally transferring drivers' personal data to a contractor in China without consent. Okay, Norway really doesn't mess about if companies play free-flowing games with its citizens' data. I love that. Though Norway is not part of the EU, it's a member of the European Economic Area, okay, the EEA. So when the EU rolled out GDPR back in 2018, Norway agreed to follow it too. And GDPR basically lays down the law about how companies and organizations need to handle people's personal information. It gives you, the user, complete control over your data, and companies need crystal clear consent to do anything with it. For country number 3, we have Iceland. That small, cold, beautiful island is actually a privacy powerhouse, okay? Iceland, and this is fascinating, completely rewrote their privacy laws in 2010 and launched the Icelandic Modern Media Initiative. The IMMI made Iceland a safe haven for journalists and whistleblowers. And those same laws, they protect your personal data too. Companies storing data in Iceland can't hand over your information without a valid Icelandic court order, even if other governments want it. Plus, Journalists and their sources got bulletproof protection. So if someone wants to call out organizations' wrongdoing, they can do so with full anonymity. Let's talk about a possibly unexpected privacy defender, Romania. They have their own solid privacy laws, but being in the EU means they've got that they follow GDPR too. In 2019, UniCredit Bank had this massive data leak. Like over 300,000 customers had their personal info exposed. The Romanian Data Protection Authority hit them with a €130,000 fine for GDPR breaches. Let's talk about Canada. Their privacy laws are so strict that companies like Sync.com chose to base their entire operation there. They've got something they call PIP EDA. Companies must follow 10 key principles under PIP EDA law, including getting clear consent before collecting personal data, only collecting information that's really necessary, and telling people exactly why they're collecting the data. And here's what makes Canada special. These rules apply to any company handling Canadian data, whether they're based in Toronto or Tokyo. Break these rules, you're looking at fines up to $100,000 per violation, which can quickly add up for companies that handle data for thousands or millions of customers. But now let's talk about the countries you need to watch out for. Take the US, for example. Unlike other countries that have one big privacy law covering everything, the US has different rules for healthcare, different ones for education, different ones for banking. You get the idea, right? But get this, under something called Section 702 of FISA, government agencies can collect, without a warrant, emails, browser history, chat messages, and phone records of non-Americans overseas. Now, they can't legally target Americans directly because that would violate the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. But data on US citizens is still collected when they interact with a foreign surveillance target. Now imagine you're emailing back and forth with a friend. Under Section 702, if your friend is being monitored, maybe because they work at a sensitive company, for example, every email you send to them gets collected too. So even though you're an American citizen and they're not supposed to be watching you, your messages, your travel plans, maybe even your attached photos, all of that gets swept up. And that's not just emails. You know, even being on a phone call where one person is being recorded, everything you say gets recorded too, even though you never agreed to it. They call this an incidental collection, like whoops. In 2016 alone, they had over 106,000 surveillance targets. Information collected under the law without a warrant can be used to prosecute and even imprison people. And then there's China. They've got the Great Firewall. All internet traffic in and out of China has to pass through government-controlled gateways. At these checkpoints, they can block content, track information, and inspect what's moving through their networks. Yeah, you're safe to assume pretty much nothing you do online is private in China. 4 years ago, China introduced its Personal Information Protection Law. Think of it as China's version of GDPR, but with a twist. According to experts, it actually puts a very few limits on what the government itself can do with people's data. Multiple security laws create exceptions that give authorities access to personal information. Tech giants like Apple had to build separate data centers just for Chinese users, and companies like LinkedIn chose to leave the market entirely. Now, something to cover is how companies approach data management. For example, many cloud services extend GDPR regulations to its global users, and that means they will treat your data like they would if you were in the EU, even if technically they don't have to. This is just good practice on their part. But if you're in the US and you choose to have your data stored in a Swiss data center, for example, pCloud gives you this option. You're not fully covered by Swiss laws per se. If the American government requests information from you, it will be complex because there's a good chance a company will need to hand it over. That's why opting for zero-knowledge provider is so important, since it prevents the company from being able to access the contents of your files. What's the real takeaway here? Well, after testing cloud services for basically my entire career, I can tell you this: Switzerland, Norway and Iceland are your absolute best bets for privacy. The unfortunate truth is if you don't live in those countries or a company doesn't officially operate there, there's little you can do. You just have to surrender to what your home nation approach to data law is, or move, but perhaps that's not such a good idea. Except there is something you can do. Okay, instead of relying on the cloud provider to respect your privacy, you can take matters into your own hands. By using third-party encryption software such as Cryptometer, you can encrypt your files before you upload them to the cloud, making it impossible for anyone but you to unlock them again. Bear in mind that this still leaves a whole lot of metadata lying around. Think upload dates, access times, and file sizes for the provider or the authorities to look at. But it's a whole lot better than actually leaving the proverbial barn door wide open, if you ask me. One last thing, and this is important. Drop a comment below and telling me where your cloud storage is based. And I bet some of you might be surprised when you actually check. Plus, I actually read and respond to comments, especially when we're talking about something this important. Thanks for sticking around to the end. And remember, when it comes to data privacy, location matters more than most people think. All right, catch you in the next one, guys. Bye.